But our last speaker of the day will be speaking of the three pillars of Freemasonry. And I'll turn it over to Brother Todd Creason.
Okay, here we go. Thank you all for coming today. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you all take something that you learned today back to your lodges with you. I wanted to leave you today with some ideas about how you might promote more education in your own lodges at home. Masons that attend events like this very often are the ones who are interested in bringing more education into their lodges. So I thought I'd share a few things I've learned over the years about Masonic education, some of the things that we're doing here at Homer Lodge number 199, and share with you where we may be going next in our efforts here. So, and I'll tell you right now, the first few slides don't have anything to do with what I'm saying at all. So, oops. All right. Masonic education is more than 15 minutes at the end of a regularly stated meeting, when your master remembers. And it's more than reading a short top bulletin at the end of that meeting that has already run too long. Believe it or not, I know what it's like to be that guy that's prepared a 20-minute presentation that I'm called on to give right at the end of a long meeting when everybody's already ready to go home. It's kind of like right now. So, Masonic education is more than just having conversations about lodge education. There's no shortage of conversations about lodge educations. Do you know what there's a shortage of? Actual lodge education. I've been having conversations about lodge education with Masons for more than a dozen years. And sometimes I feel like we're no further along now than when I first began. The only thing that seems to have changed is now that we're now talking more about lodge education. However, we're still not actually doing it in a lot of places. Another unrelated slide. Masonic education venues like the Midnight Freemasons, the Whence Came You podcast, the Knights of the Masonic Round Table have come into existence and become wildly popular, proving without question that there is still a huge interest in the teachings of Freemasonry. The Midnight Freemasons alone enjoys a readership of anywhere from 50 to 70,000 readers a month. However, when you bring up lodge education in many lodges, you're going to be met with skepticism and resistance. Heaven forbid we do something to improve the quality of our meetings and give our members something to think about. It winds up being a discussion about how the members don't want the meetings to be any longer and totally miss the point that perhaps our members want to get something more out of their meetings. More than 10 years ago, after I published my first book, I was invited to speak at the Illinois Lodge of Research during the weekend of our Grand Lodge's annual convocation. And I wanted to talk about something I thought was right up their alley: lodge education and improving the member experience. I got up there to a full house, which included the current Grand Master of Illinois and two past Grand Masters of Illinois, and started making my case. Sorry, I already can't talk. In front of this group that I thought represented the state's leading Masonic researchers, writers, and educators, I boldly stated something that is absolutely true. I said that lodge education could solve almost every problem our lodges are having today. I expected applause when I said that. What I got was quite a few chuckles. That was the last thing that I expected from that room. Afterwards, I had a long line in front of me of Masons telling me I had a lot to learn about Freemasonry. It told me what I needed to know early on, and it changed the way I went about doing what I wanted to do. I realized after that meeting I wasn't going to get much help. The only guy that came up to me afterwards and said that I was right about the need for Masonic education was the past Grand Master Noel C. Dix. We've become good friends over the years, and he's been a tremendous supporter of all the things we've worked to do in this part of the state over the last dozen years. In fact, that library right behind you there, he arranged that. That was a donation that Noel arranged for us just a few months ago. He put us together with a guy that had a bunch of books that he wanted to be rid of, and he knew that we wanted to start a library. Other than Noel, I knew I was on my own in the beginning, but I also knew I wasn't the only person interested in Masonic education. Even as a new Mason, I knew there were libraries full of writings about Freemasonry, so I simply went to work. The blog was born, and for a number of years, the Midnight Freemasons was singular. Just me, publishing short pieces 3 times a week. I also began putting together a group of Masons who all shared a common interest in improving Masonic education. Greg Knott joined our fraternity not long after I did, and that's when all kinds of interesting things started to happen. And we've added many, many more who share that same thought since then. But this is what I'm trying to tell you. Don't just talk about it, because you'll hear nothing but reasons why it can't be done. Why this should be. The best way to make your case is not to explain it, but it's to demonstrate it. Some people just can't believe a thing unless they see it for themselves, and that's really the approach we've taken. We don't go around talking about lodge education, we do it. What we've been able to do in this part of the state is to show Masons what a lodge dedicated to lodge education looks like and how it works. Look around you right now. You're sitting in Illinois' largest Masonic education sandbox. Homer Lodge over the last few years has been a grand experiment in what can be accomplished by focusing on enhancing the member experience through education. Just a few years ago, this lodge was very nearly closed. We couldn't get enough members up here to open our meetings, many months. This building was in terrible disrepair. The lodge was dirty and it was full of junk. The only thing keeping it going at all was a small group of Masons from Ogden Lodge up the road here that had all joined Homer in an attempt to keep it open. And even with that group from Ogden, that was getting harder and harder to do. The Royal Arch chapter that had been a part of this lodge since the beginning folded first, and we figured that the lodge wasn't too far behind it. Our district deputy grand master came for his annual visit and he laid it out. He ripped this lodge to shreds in his report, and rightly so. There was almost nothing this lodge was doing right or even doing well. We were just keeping the lights on. And there was a serious discussion after that report came out about closing this lodge. Merging Homer Lodge with Ogden Lodge. But that didn't happen. There were a few of us that were willing to didn't want to let the lodge go, and we fought for it. We wanted to make one last-ditch effort to save it. And we also saw a rare opportunity that we had here. There was a small group focused on getting the building ready for another generation of Masons, and there was another small group focused on filling the lodge with those new generation of Masons. And since the lodge had absolutely nothing to lose for closing, the membership was wide open to try anything. That was the opportunity a few of us had been waiting for. As the building got cleaned up and the junk was hauled off, we changed our meeting night with the hopes of attracting members from the local volunteer fire department, which met the same night that our lodge met. That didn't work at all, but as I said, we were wide open to try anything. We cleaned out the attic upstairs, 150 years worth of stuff had collected up there. Ray mentioned that earlier, that treasure trove that the Homer Historical Society has been going through. So I think they're still going through some of that stuff. We had so much stuff, we decided to clean out a room that was full of junk and turn it into a museum to house some of that stuff. We started a Facebook page, we started taking part in community events, like the annual soda festival here in Homer. We had an open house, we gave tours to a few local groups, we advertised our events, and finally we got around to doing the thing that really turned things around. We decided to become a lodge focused on Masonic education. Okay. Every meeting at Homer Lodge number 199 is an event. We have a speaker or a presentation or a topic of discussion. We advertise those topics and invite other lodges to join us. We open our meetings every month with education first. It's not the last thing, but the first item on the agenda, education, every month. After the education portion of the meeting is concluded, we allow any guests that have joined us to leave if they don't want to stay for our business meeting. However, most guests don't leave, they stay. Our business meetings take a very little amount of time anymore. Our secretary, who emails the minutes, our treasurer's reports are short, and our committee reports are brief and to the point. We don't have any less business than we did before. However, because our focus is on education now, we don't linger over it like we used to. We've tried a few things that work. We've tried a few things that haven't worked. I feel like we're just getting started because in just the last couple of years, things are beginning to finally turn around. Our members enjoy the meetings, and we get guests that attend almost every month. We've had a number of members from other lodges become dual members here because our meetings are so enjoyable. The Grand Lodge of Illinois is pointing at us as an example of what an education lodge looks like. In fact, the Grand Lodge was here a couple of years ago and rededicated this lodge. The Illinois Lodge of Research is holding their event here today. Homer Lodge has gone from being a building that was used 3 hours a month to becoming the center of the Masonic universe in this part of the state. In just the last 3 years, the building has been used by the Illinois Lodge of Research, the Royal Arch Grand Chapter of Illinois, the Knight Masons, the Allied Masonic Degrees, the Shrine, Scottish Rite Valley of Danville, and others. And even though we've been through gallons and gallons of paint, varnish, and lemon oil, it was primarily Masonic education that brought this building back to life again. And remember, that Royal Arch chapter that I mentioned had finally died here? It took us 3 years, but we now have a brand new chapter of the Royal Arch in this building. Admiration chapter number 282. We only had one major hurdle in accomplishing that in the beginning. When we first started talking about it, the Royal Arch, most excellent Grand High Priest of Illinois, was completely against the new chapter here at Homer. So I killed him. I'm just kidding. I didn't kill him. He's fine. He survived from a lousy shot, apparently. Actually, that was William J. Hussey. He helped us get started with the new chapter. We went through Sean McBride, who helped take us a little bit further down the road, and Jim Tome, who's now the worshipful master of the Illinois Lodge of Research, was the one that finally issued our charter. Admiration chapter is a very unusual and unique chapter here in the state of Illinois because it's also primarily focused on providing a better member experience through our focus on Masonic education. We're doing the same things in Admiration chapter that we're doing at Homer Lodge. And for a new chapter, we have a lot of new members, and we continue to add new members, and we continue coming up with ideas about how to improve what we're doing. Admiration chapter is one of the few Masonic organizations that I belong to that actually created a mission statement. We came up with that mission in the very early stages, in the beginning of our chartering process. As I told the members of the Illinois Lodge of Research so many years ago to their great amusement, Masonic education is the solution to every major problem that lodges have today. That's because Freemasonry, by design, is about education. It's not a social club. That's part of it, but that's not the goal of Freemasonry. It's not a charitable organization either, although that too can be a part of it. The self-professed goal of Freemasonry is to make good men better. Freemasonry, at its core, is about teaching. It's about mentorship. It's about educating our members. What is one of the first questions we ask men back in the preparation room before they enter the lodge for the first time? Do you seriously declare upon your honor that you are prompted to solicit the privileges of Freemasonry by a desire of knowledge and a sincere wish of being serviceable to your fellow creatures? In other words, you're coming here to learn and be trained to be a better man so that you can better serve mankind. Those interrogatories go on to inform the candidate that Masonry consists of a course of ancient hieroglyphic moral instruction taught agreeably to ancient usages. In other words, get ready to learn what we have to teach. You've come here because you want to learn what we have to teach, and we have a system in place to teach you those morals, tenets, and skills you've knocked on our door to receive. But that education that anyway, I don't know where I was going with that last sentence. And that's where Freemasonry tends to drop the ball. Many new Masons go from 3 amazing and thought-provoking degrees that many of us remember as one of the most remarkable experiences of our life, is sitting in a lodge room listening to somebody read the mail, followed by a testy debate about whether we should have ham and beans or wieners for dinner after the next meeting. Masonic education is not a part of the culture in the majority of lodges out there today. That's the challenge. It hasn't been for a long time. So when it comes up, many members think we're trying to introduce something brand new into our meetings. Actually, what we're pushing for is a return to our roots. At Homer Lodge number 199 in Admiration Chapter 282, we've focused our efforts so far on just improving the quality of our meetings, offering good discussions on topics of interest, giving great presentations every meeting. We want to make those meetings something our members enjoy, something they talk about, and something they bring their brothers to. All of our meetings at Homer are open to entered apprentices, fellow crafts, and master masons. And some of the events we've done at Admiration Chapter have been open to non-York Rite Masons. We've even had non-Masonic groups who have joined us for our education portion. You met Ainsley this morning from the Odd Fellows. He was one of the first like that. He came here and presented for one of our regularly stated meetings. This just a couple months ago in February, we invited the Boy Scouts to a pizza party here, and we had a presentation about Freemasonry and scouting during our regularly stated meeting. But there's more to Masonic education than presentations and speakers. So over the holidays, I spent a little time coming up with what I thought of as the next steps for what Homer Lodge might take part in. I call it the 3 pillars of Masonic education. It's a very simple model because I'm very simple-minded. So the other reason I kept it simple is because every lodge is different. Well, has worked here, probably won't work in your lodge, but I think all 3 of these pillars I'm going to describe to you are key in creating a lodge environment where both the members and the lodge thrives. We've already been over the first one at length, lodge education and improving meetings. One of the things I have to say about that is make education the focus of your meetings. Keep business meetings as short as possible. And as I said before, make sure your presentations are interesting and not too advanced for the general member. We've all been to that presentation. The presenter is talking about a topic way too advanced for the audience, and it's way too long. There's no sense in adding education to your lodge if the education is as boring as your meetings were. So know what your lodge is interested in and know your presenters. Advertise your meetings. I think the future of this lodge is going to be that it's going to be a regional education lodge. The future is with members that join as dual members of this lodge. I could be wrong, but that's what we're beginning to see. If you do good education pieces and you advertise your meetings, you'll get visitors. You may even encourage those visitors to work on improving their own meetings. Or they may actually join your lodge. Pay attention during meetings and make note of places where the meetings drag on or parts of the meetings that are unnecessary or could be done differently. For the first 3 years I was a member of Ogden Lodge, right up the road from here. Greg will attest to this. Hoop was there too. We had the exact same conversation every single month for about 3 years, wasn't it? We talked about 2 signs that we bought that we wanted to be hung on signposts on either side of town. And we talked about this amazing stained glass window that we had laying down in the back room of our lodge that had survived a tornado. We wanted to get that framed and put up in the lodge and backlit as a display piece in the lodge. And every month we talked about the signs, which nobody hung in the previous month, and we talked about the stained glass window that nobody got mounted and displayed in the previous month. And this went on month after month after month after month. The signs never got hung, the stained glass never got mounted. Now, I don't recall who finally lost their mind first, but I think it was Greg. I think Greg stood up at one meeting and said, you know, if we're not going to hang those signs and we're not going to hang that stained glass, then let's stop talking about it. And about 2 months later, I think both of those projects were done. Somebody went out and hung the signs, and we got a guy who built the frame, and it's now the centerpiece of our lodge with our stained glass window. That's an extreme example, but every lodge has those places that drag on and on. Identify them, point them out, and fix them. We didn't learn anything at Ogden Lodge from that experience. We just started in on the next thing. Now, the Eastern Star ladies were drinking all of our coffee and not replacing it. And we went on about that for several months until somebody finally said, why don't we just lock it up? When you have new Masons in your lodge, take time to explain things that you're discussing with them. When I first joined, the secretary of Ogden Lodge would see during a conversation I had no idea what they were talking about, and he would interject himself into the conversation, stop and explain what it was they were talking about to me. That's how I learned about the Grand Lodge annual meeting, and that's how I learned about workers' clubs. That's how I learned what the Valley of Danville was. That's how I learned what a Grand Lecturer was and a certified lodge instructor. Denver Phelps would stop the meeting and remind everybody I was there and a new Mason didn't know what they were talking about, and he'd explain it to me. We have new Masons in our lodge now. We have Sam and Noah, and when they attend, I try and do the same thing, because we can't forget, if they don't know about this stuff, they're not going to be involved in it. Another two big thing that the second leg of my 3 pillars of Masonic education are resources. We have to provide resources for our members. And the very, very first thing we should do is good communication. We've got call-em-alls. We've got social media pages. We've got email lists. We need to have good member contact information. And we also need to have event calendars so everybody knows what's going on. Those resources are vital so that your members know what's going on and that they're in communication with you at all times. Oh, I listed all those. Wasn't that nice? Information for members. How about a reading list for new members of what some good books would be to read about Masonry? Or the other thing I thought, I'm working on that actually now, is some lodge information, like a brochure or a pamphlet for new members so that they have an idea of the history of the organization that they're joining, like a brief lodge history. And a list of lodge officers with contact information that is disseminated to the members regularly. When I first joined, I had no idea how many members the lodge had. As it turned out, I knew many of them. And I had no idea who the officers were, and it took me some time to figure out and learn all their names. I remember having a question early on between meetings, and I had no idea who I could call. I had no contact information at all in the beginning. That's important for new members. Information from members about Grand Lodge programs. Very important too. Let your new members know what's going on in the fraternity too. One of the biggest resources for lodge members is an education officer. As a secretary who served for 7 years at Ogden Lodge, I can tell you that too much of this stuff winds up falling on the secretary's lap. And shouldn't. Should. Every lodge should have an education officer. And a lodge should come up with a job description, but its main duties would be to schedule the education portions of the meeting, to advertise those events, to create materials useful for the continued educational benefit of the membership. Another thing that you can do, that we're doing here, is put together a library. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be a shelf where members share books they've read. Or if the lodge has financial resources and a budget, the education officer and the committee can start putting together a collection for the use of the lodge members. Another great resource you already have in your lodge, museums and decorating. We've got a relatively new lodge in Ogden. The tornado took our old lodge down in '96. So we got a fairly new building. We really haven't done much decorating until recent years, especially in our dining room. We have all kinds of neat stuff in our storage area, including some old aprons. when I was secretary, I framed 3 of those old aprons, the one for the master, the senior, and junior wardens. And we hung them out in the dining room. And underneath each one, we have a photo of the officer in our lodge that serves in that office. It was an easy thing to do, but people that visit our lodge really enjoy it, and looking at the old aprons and seeing who our dais officers are. Now, you visit some old lodges and they haven't hung anything new up on their walls since 1965, and it makes you wonder if they're still doing anything. So one of the things you can do is use your walls to tell your story. And the third leg of Masonic education is mentorship. And that starts with the Intender program. The Intender program is a do-it-yourself program. There should be a mentor and there should be a teacher involved with that new petitioner from day one through his raising. I'm pretty good at it, and I find that candidates have a lot of questions in the beginning. And if you make yourself available to answer them, it's a good thing for them. I have 2 of mine here today. I got Noah, he's our newest Master Mason here at Homer Lodge. We've got Sam, who's now the 2nd newest Mason of Homer Lodge. Start early with your candidates and get to know them. Another way you can help your members get acclimated and you can help member your Masons is have social events where new members and even established members can get to know each other better. And don't forget to include families in the event planning. Darren Landers had a very good idea recently, a chili dinner. We had it at Ogden Lodge just a couple of weeks ago and had 4 lodges invited. We had a great turnout, and it was fun. We had about 6 pots of chili, which ranged in flavor from mild to holy cow. And the wives and the kids joined us as well. Another good thing you can do, networking assistance. Finding out what the members are interested in and matching them up with Masons that have similar interests. We all get something different out of the fraternity, and some of us have different interests. I was interested in research, and a member of my lodge put me in contact with the Illinois Lodge of Research. Some guys like motorcycles, so there's Widow's Sons for them. Some want to learn rituals, to be sure they know where they can go to get that instruction. And there's also places that you can go for networking. Greg Nutt and I had an idea of putting together a lunch club we could use for networking. It wound up being a new High 12 club in Champaign, the Illini High 12. It's open to everybody. You don't have to be a member to join us for lunch every month. We usually have a speaker. But I think the best part of that group is often members of High 12 have brought potential members to lunch. They've also brought their entered apprentices, their fellow crafts, and their new Master Masons. It gives those new Master Masons, or those new Masons, an opportunity to network and meet new people. And it also gives them the idea that our fraternity extends far beyond the walls of just their lodge. Involve the new members early on. Make new members feel they are part of your lodge right from the very beginning. I was raised on a Saturday morning. When I joined, entered apprentices and fellow crafts didn't attend meetings, so that next Wednesday when we had a regularly stated meeting, it was the very first meeting I'd ever been to. Denver asked me if I'd be willing to sit in the chaplain's chair. He asked me in advance, and I did. I quickly learned 2 short paragraphs, the opening and closing prayers, which I botched horribly. And I've been messing up ritual ever since. Should have been here Monday night. But I was invited to participate. I was asked my opinion. If you make people feel like they're involved, they will be involved. Let me leave you with a couple things to think about if you decide to try and promote better education in your lodge. Go slow. Change is hard, and it's especially hard in an environment where no changes happen in decades. You're going to be talking about doing something in your lodge that most of your members have never seen. So go slow. Take what few minutes you might be able to get and use them to your greatest advantage. Don't explain what you want to do. Show them what you want to do. Start with very short, extremely interesting topics and build from there. Don't make more work for your secretary or for your master or any of the other officers of the lodge. Do the work yourself and recruit members to help you that are interested in education as you go along. You'll know you're doing it right when the members start asking you what your piece is going to be about next month. Once you start building a team of Masons interested in promoting education in your lodge, take turns presenting, and then take your show on the road. contact the area education officer and see if he has lodges where you can go and do your presentations. There's no sense in spending time putting together a presentation you only do one time. Go out and share it. But more important than anything, don't just talk about lodge education, do the lodge education. That's how the Midnight Freemasons began. And you don't have to be an expert presenter or a speaker or a researcher. Just simply show what you're learning from the subject you're studying. You'll get better as you go along. Early on, the Midnight Freemasons had 11 contributors, and of those 11 contributors, only 3 of us had ever published anything previously. So we learned as we went along. And everybody's favorite slide. Anybody have any questions? I'm out.